What can we expect then from the ECB caught in this storm of market volatility? Have they boxed themselves in on 50 basis points?
Look, Tom, this is an ever-changing narrative going on here. If you remember, just a week ago, the idea was this was a central bank on autopilot, 50 basis points, core inflation is sticky, and obviously they had to continue. The idea was that they would have to continue to hike aggressively. We've seen this chaos in the banking sector, which has prompted this debate of will they go softer for 25 basis points. Now, obviously, we've had the Swiss come in overnight to try to change the sentiment. Is that going to bring back then the 50 basis points back on the table? And I would point to the words of the head of the European Central Bank herself a month ago, who calibrated this 50 basis points guide very well to markets, where she said this is a very strong determination. It will not change unless, quote, something extreme happens. The question is whether what's going on at Credit Suisse is extreme enough for the European Central Bank to change course. That is fundamentally the question going into this meeting. Now, the other point, Tom, if I may, also has to do with the sequence going forward. Remember, up until a week ago, this whole idea was that, okay, March is done, and then we have to focus on May. Is she going to be now in a position where she can calibrate and guide the market, given the volatility that we see about the next 2 months to come? Or is this now an idea where the European Central Bank will say, well, this forward guidance, we have to tone it down, because in reality, there are too many moves going on. We're not in a position to give any specific guidance going forward.
Yeah, the ability to adjust and be flexible in this environment. And on those risks, and you talk about that caveat that she gave herself, or at least a slight window to be able to react around that 50 basis point commitment. Of course, the banking stocks in Europe fell 8.4% yesterday. Another brutal session. Will there be a message, do you think, to calm markets from this central bank?
Listen, another brutal day. You had names that were dropping by more than 10% for a second consecutive day, Tom. I mean, these are big moves that are going on in the European banking sector. We have not really heard from the European Central Bank on this issue. Obviously, the reasons are clear. The deliberations are ongoing. This is a quiet period, and decision day is today. Although we did have a number of reports that the ECB had reached out to banks just to figure out the kind of exposure that they have from Credit Suisse, or would have to Credit Suisse. Also, remember on Monday when I spoke to the head of the Eurogroup, Pascal Donahue, he told me, in fact, regulators were already on the case, and that was back to the Silicon Valley Bank. But in terms of today, look, we've seen the Swiss overnight, again, repeat on this point. They are ready to provide liquidity. Maybe that changes things for them in the Swiss banking system, but you also need a strong voice when it comes to the European banking sector. And this has to come from the head of the European Central Bank. So I expect a lot of questions on this in the press conference. And obviously, you know, a challenging communication exercise from the head of the European Central Bank, who really needs to instill confidence in her own market and kind of make it clear the contagion risks are indeed in some ways contained now.